Hi everyone, it's Rachel back with the Shades of Orange. Today I'm here to do another round of recent reads focusing on science fiction and fantasy this time. This is a combination of review books and books that I simply just want to gush about on camera. Before we get started, I do want to do a quick booktuber shout out, and I'm going to try to do this a little more often, but I'm sure I'll forget in some videos. But this time I want to shout out one of my new favorite science fiction booktubers, and that is Monica from Mooni Reads. She reads a whole bunch of science fiction as well as other genres, but what I love so much about her channel is that she reads incredibly diversely. So if you are like myself and are becoming more aware of the need to read diversely in different ways, whether it be someone of different sexual orientation or of a different culture and so forth, she always has amazing books to recommend and a lot of books that are more underhyped. So highly recommend her channel. I am addicted. I basically watch all of her videos. She has a great personality and does some great wrap-up videos, but also discussion videos. So go check her out. But otherwise, let's talk about my own science fiction fantasy reading. First, let's start with a rather unpopular opinion, and I read The Space Between Worlds by Micaiah. This is set in a future where scientists have discovered different multiverses. In order to travel between them, your other half or person has to be dead. And so we follow a young woman who does a lot of world hopping because she is dead in almost all the other multiverses that they have found, except for just a handful, I believe 8. And so this story is told from her perspective as you get to see her moving between worlds and working for the agency that is funding her to do so. This book is not bad, but it definitely left me disappointed, and that's because I personally love multiverse stories, but for a book with that premise, there was actually very little world hopping in it. Instead, the book was much more focused on the characters and more so the relationships. I appreciated a lot about this book. This book has a female-female relationship at the center of it. I'm not a huge fan of romance, but I do appreciate that queer representation. And this book also deals with the fact that the main character's class and privilege is really part of the reason that she's able to do this jumping between worlds, because she is of a lower class and had a rougher start to her life in so many of these worlds. That is why she didn't always make it to adulthood. And I really do think it speaks to, again, like privilege versus those that don't always get the same advantages in their youth. And so it was very topical, but in terms of a story, it just did not work for me. I thought this would be more of a sci-fi thriller, and I really wouldn't describe it that way. I am just not really a fan of the character drama and relationships that were so centered to this book. And if I'm honest, my biggest complaint is that I never got connected with a female character. She is not a bad character, but I just found her to be quite flat. And for a book that is so character driven, I really need to get invested in that main person. And I found her just oh so forgettable. So a little bit unpopular because everyone else is gushing about this book online, but I thought it was just okay. I think I gave it 3 stars. Next, I read The Quantum Magician by Künsken. This is a book that I requested from the publisher Rebellion Publishing. And this is set in a future where people are able to be bioengineered in order to have minds that work around quantum theory. This book specifically follows a man who is highly intelligent because of his bioengineering. However, he uses this gift not necessarily for good, but for his own purposes. He basically is a con man. At the beginning of the story, he gets an offer that seems too good to be true. He is asked to go do a heist job and the payout is amazing, and so he agrees to do it. And this book basically follows the beats of a heist story. So he goes around and finds his team, he finds all of the experts he needs in order to pull this off, and then they go and do the heist. So if that sounds like a premise that you would enjoy, I definitely recommend it. I know heist stories are a big buzzword for a lot of us readers, and I was definitely intrigued to find a science fiction version of heist stories because typically they're more on the side of fantasy. I'll be honest, the actual science in the story did kind of go over my head. I found the quantum theory just didn't really make sense to me, and that's because I really don't have any background in that area. So I did find myself wishing to read some nonfiction on the subject and then come back to the series because I think I'll appreciate it a lot more. However, that being said, while the hard science fiction in the story was not very accessible to newbie readers or readers without that scientific background, I'll still say that you can enjoy the story regardless, because again, it really is a heist story. And those tropes, and again, those beats of that subgenre were very present and clear in the story. So you kind of have to skim through the parts that are a little bit more dense, but you're still going to enjoy having the quirky sidekicks, the gang getting together and getting to see them try to pull off this heist. So again, if you're a heist fan, even if you're not a big science fiction reader, I would still recommend this one. It was definitely a lot of fun. I didn't fully connect with the characters and all that, but it definitely made for a fun, breezy read with, like I said, a whole layer of science that kind of went over my head as I was trying to read it. Next, I read the original by Brandon Sanderson and Mary Robinette Kowal. This actually read as an audiobook via NetGalley's new audiobook review program. And this is a sci-fi thriller that is set in a future where a woman wakes up and finds out that she is the clone of a woman who is accused of murdering her husband. So she is created as this clone and given the memories of her original self, as well as some other technical abilities like how to fire a gun. And she is tasked with going off and finding the woman who is her original and killing her and basically bringing her to justice for this murder. I'll be honest, the premise behind this one really did sound pretty unbelievable, but because of the authors behind it, I decided to pick it up anyway. This was a fast-paced thriller, but I don't feel like it really brought anything new to the genre. I'm a huge fan of Brandon Sanderson as a fantasy writer, but I've read a bit of his science fiction and I just find it to be very average, and I just don't really feel like he's bringing new ideas or being overly creative. All of the things that were in this book I've read before oh so many times. So if you're looking for a fun science fiction thriller, especially if you don't read a lot of them, you might really enjoy this one. It is a novella, so it's quite short, and I would have liked to see more world building, more from the characters. It was just, again, okay. So I do want to mention, because I got to listen to the audio version, that I love the narration. I'm a huge fan of Julia Whalen. I think she's one of the best narrators out there. She mostly does like contemporary, so I'm always excited when it crosses over with a book I'm actually interested in. But the book was a little bit overproduced with a lot of music and sounds in the background, which I found very distracting. I kept taking off my headphones and thinking that the TV was on or something like that. So kind of would recommend this one if you like sci-fi thrillers and aren't kind of burned out on the standard ones, because again, this one is just another 3-star read, so take it with what you will. Next, I want to talk about another review copy, and that is The Phlebotomist by Chris Panatier. And this is one that I requested from Angry Robot Books. This is a near future dystopian where there has been a war, and in the aftermath, there is a need for more blood. And so the government has created a mandatory blood draw, which the citizens call the harvest. So every citizen has to give blood on a regular basis. But more than that, the government will actually pay for people to give extra blood. This is quite dangerous and unhealthy from a health perspective, but because they are willing to pay people, those that are desperate and need the money are willing to do that. And I really like the premise behind this one, because if you are like me and read a fair amount of science fiction, I'm always interested in a science fiction book that is just different. And despite having read a lot of dystopian books, I've never read one that is so focused around blood. And the actual science behind this book was really interesting. There's a lot of hard science about blood and how it works with clotting, and I definitely learned a lot. It reminded me a lot of things I learned in high school, but also went above and beyond that, and I learned things that I never knew before, some really fun facts. So I really liked the science there. That was probably one of my favorite parts of this story. I also really like that the main female character is older. She is actually a grandmother, and so she's, I believe, in her like 50s or 60s, and works as one of these people that does blood draws. The general premise behind this book is that she gets pulled into some conspiracy theories and finds out that there are some evil corporations doing some terrible things. The actual plot didn't really grab my attention, and that was too bad because this book had a lot of promise. But I think if it sounds like the kind of thing that would intrigue you, I do recommend trying it for yourself, because there's a lot of really good things happening in this book. And again, I just really enjoyed learning about all the science behind blood, which is not a topic I thought I was interested in, but this book made it really interesting to read about. So definitely a more underhyped one that I think will appeal to, again, readers looking for something really unique. Now, switching over to fantasy, I want to talk about The Grace of Kings by Ken Liu, which is the first book in the Dandelion Dynasty trilogy. And this is an epic fantasy series that is inspired by the historical Chinese dynasties. The general simple plot is that it's set in a historical past where there is an empire that is ruling over most of the people, and then we are following different pockets of rebels that are trying to overthrow the empire and just get some sort of freedom. Now, this book I loved for so many reasons. First and foremost is the characters. You are told the story from multiple perspectives, but there are a few main perspectives that you mostly stick with, and they were so memorable. You don't actually get as much time getting the full backstory on everyone that you might get in a different book. So in some ways, I wouldn't describe this as a character-driven story because it's really more about the larger politics of this world. But despite just having little nuggets about these characters, you get pulled into their backstories and their personalities so easily because they're so well drawn in such a limited way. It's hard to describe, but I just found myself rooting for them. And despite actually having a whole host of characters, they were really memorable, which surprises me because I'm usually someone who is terrible with names and I get confused who's who. But I found that everyone was just so distinct, and I just fell deeply into this story. I will say that this book is very politically focused with a large emphasis on battles and war strategy. So you do have really a bird's eye view of this time period because this book actually does jump forward in time at several places, and you really are moving through different locations around this Asian-inspired landscape. And so you get to see the different battles, you get to see people maneuvering and trying to get themselves into positions of power. So I would actually recommend this book to fans of A Song of Ice and Fire. It's certainly not the exact same, but what it has in common is the fact that you really have different groups, again, trying to get into power and different people stabbing each other in the back, trying to, get different deals, and you just get to see a lot of different dynamics. The biggest complaint I've heard for this book is that it doesn't feature a lot of strong female characters, and I will acknowledge that it is a book that is a bit more male-centric, and that is just because it is so based off of the true history of China. However, it's very clear that the author is writing a very feminist story, and there are so many times in this book that he addresses the inequality between men and women, and towards the end, they introduce one female character who is so strong and so brilliant, and you will love her. So definitely recommend this series. I have since gone on to read the sequel, and that book is The Wall of Storms. I'll say that I really did enjoy it, but not quite as much as the first book. It jumps another 10 years ahead in time, and it always takes me a while when books do that in their sequels because I typically like them to basically pick up exactly where we left off. So it took me a while to get back into it. There were some new characters introduced, and I did take a little bit of time to get invested in them, but once I was pulled into the story. The second book is even longer than the first, and for my purposes, I felt like it could have been shorter. It also has a little bit of a different focus. The first one, again, is more military focused, while the second book is a little bit more about governing, and so there's a lot of talk about different policies and equal education, and so it doesn't have quite as much action as the first. So I think depending on which parts of the series you're most drawn to, some people will like the first book better and some people actually like the second book better. I lean towards liking the first book better, but I still really liked that second one and would definitely recommend anyone to check it out. I'm really looking forward to reading the third and final book in this trilogy, which should be coming out next year. So that is it for this video. Let me know down below which the books you are most interested in reading yourself. As well, recommend me your favorite Asian-inspired fantasy because I have become obsessed after reading the Dandelion Dynasty. I'm currently doing a reread through the Poppy War series, and I have read both Jade City and Jade War. They're going to be coming in a future review, so I've read those. But if you have other recommendations for Asian-inspired fantasy, or even better, Asian-inspired science fiction, because I don't think I've read any, and I'm not even sure if I'm aware of any. So if you do have an underhyped recommendation, I would love to hear about it. Otherwise, please don't forget to check out Monica's channel. I really do love her videos, so I hope you will as well. And if you're new to my own channel, consider subscribing to me. I do read a lot of science fiction, fantasy, horror, and thrillers. Otherwise, don't forget to give the video a thumbs up and share it around online. Hit that notification bell. It all really helps me out. Thank you so much for watching. I will talk to you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.